Hey guys, welcome back to Kevin Wilson SBC. I'm excited to share with you our third trip out ever with the 53 Studebaker going to Darlington Dragway. It's been a long time since I've been to Darlington, but huge shout out to the crew there. It was a very cold, windy Wednesday evening, and these guys did an amazing job trying to keep the track prep correct and keep the track safe. So huge shout out to Darlington Dragway. In this video, there are 5 runs that we were able to make. And I want to cover each run. I also want to cover the suspension changes that we made from our first couple trips out at South Carolina Motorplex in Orangeburg, and then the suspension changes we made to go to Darlington, and then the next suspension change I'm going to make before we take the car back out. We had a personal best of our 60-foot and our 8th mile ET. But we are going to have to make some changes to the Chance converter. The converter is extremely tight, so I am working with those guys to get the converter loosened up a little bit, but more to come on that. Even with the converter being as tight as it is, we made a personal best, like I said, on 60-foot and the 8th mile ET. We had the 2-step working this time out, and the car really seemed to like the 2-step. But we will walk through each of the 5 runs. I'll explain to you the changes we made to each of the runs and go through that. So thank you for all the support that you give the channel. I am excited to get some Chalkboard Series videos back out very soon. And I know that the updates on the Studebaker are important, though, because I'm trying to apply the stuff that I've been talking about to my own car and then show you the results of how the car responds to that. So thank you for your patience with that. Let's jump in and let's get started with going over the videos and going over the 5 runs from Darlington Dragway, and I look forward to making some more changes and getting the car back out. Thank you for your support. Let's jump in. Okay, here is the original 4-link setup that we had the car configured with when we took the car out to South Carolina Motorplex for the first 2 trips out. You can see here that it was fairly aggressive for a big tire slick car. However, without a 2-step, leaving from an idle, we had a 115 60-foot and a 508 ET at 140 miles an hour. Now this is with the Hughes Performance welded converter, and this actually did pretty well. Now, I wanted to make a big change on the suspension when we went to Darlington. I was trying to get a little more or a lot more squat in the car and trying to get the front end weight transfer more to the rear. So here's the 4-link Darlington suspension setup on the 4-link. We were using a 2-step at 3,600 RPMs for our best run of the night, and it had a 114 60-foot and it ran a 5.00 8th mile ET. We were so close to the 490 range. Now let me show you the change I'm going to make before we go back out. I'm going to keep the lower 4-link bar level, and I'm going to bring the top bar, I'm going to give it a little more rake down, shorten the 4-link some, but still in front of the center of gravity that you can see here. And what I'm looking for, and what I was beginning to experience when I was at Darlington, I was beginning to have issues with the car staying planted on the middle of the track to the top end of the track. Now, I do know that our slicks are gone. These slicks were on the 48 Ford, and it is definitely time for us to put slicks on the car. So after run 3, I began to notice that the car was really skating around on the top end, and I was introducing wheel speed from mid-track on. Once I got into high gear, the car was really on the edge of traction. So my miles per hour after run 3 continued to fall off, and I was really having a hard time getting the tires to burn out properly. And you'll notice the smoke was decreasing each burnout. And then we got to looking at the slicks, and the slicks are completely wore out. There's just barely a wear indicator left on the slicks. And I've done a bunch of burnouts at the shop on the shop driveway, which is really just wasting the slicks. I'm getting some slicks on order, but the slicks are all back ordered right now. It looks like it'll be the middle or towards the end of December before I get slicks. So it sounds like we're done for the winter. However, this gives me time to make the suspension changes, go over some more things on the car, and I can guarantee you when we get the car back out, we will run in the 490s unless there's some mechanical problem. If the car launches and we get down the track, we're going to be running a 490 something ET with the car set up just like it is right now, minus a new suspension change. We will be making a suspension change, and of course we'll have new slicks when we go back out. And we'll probably have the converter changed a little bit before we go back out to loosen it up just a tad. Right now the converter's grabbing around 5,300 RPMs. But on the shift, I'm having about 1,700 RPM drop in RPMs when I go from first to high gear, and that's with a 169 first gear power glide. So the converter is really tight, so we need to loosen it up a tad, and I think that's going to help get the car into the 490 range. Let's jump in here and take a look at the first pass. Now this first pass is with 8 pounds of air pressure, 3,600 RPM launch, and timing is locked in at 30 degrees, and this is with 21 to 22 pounds of boost. So let's take a look at the first pass. So right off the trailer, I was pretty ecstatic with a 501 ET and a 114 60 foot. So I was fairly confident we were going to get a 490 pass this night. So let's take a look at run number 2. For run number 2, I went ahead and set the two-step from 3,600 to 3,800 RPM, and that was the only change I made. I did not put more air in, take air out. I left everything else alone. I just changed the two-step, and you'll see here in a minute how the car responded with a higher two-step, just 200 RPMs. Let's take a look at run number 2. Okay, you can see with run number 2, I made one initial mistake. I almost deep staged the car. I really try to bring the second staging light. I just barely try to flicker it and bring it on. However, I pulled right in and double bulb, so I knew I was probably staged a hair deeper, but the car lost a little 60 foot at the 3,800 RPM mark, and you can see here on the time slip that I just showed, we had a 117 60 foot, and it lost some ET. We ran a 506 at 138 miles an hour, and at this point I did change the shift point some on the second run. I upped the shift point from 7,200 to 7,400, and I just kind of got to thinking, all right, let's go back to 3,600 RPMs. So let's take a look at run number 3. And what I did for run number 3 is I brought the two-step back down to 3,600, and I made sure the air pressure was still at 8 pounds in the slicks. However, I upped the shift RPM to 8,000 RPMs. Now, let me explain why I did that. I was noticing in my data logs that the RPM drop was so vast from first to high gear. I was doing everything I could to bring as much boost in before hitting high gear. So by holding the shift out to 8,000 RPMs, I was able to get a little over 23 pounds of boost versus 21 to 22. And I was hoping that would help drive the high gear in more. And you'll notice here that it definitely seemed to help. So bringing the two-step back down to 3,600, upping the shift point to 8,000 RPMs in the high gear, and making sure the slicks were still at 8 pounds of air pressure. So here's run number 3. All right, 5.00 ET, 114 60 foot, and my best mile per hour of the night, 139.19 miles an hour. So it definitely liked the higher shift point. That responded well, and the car just seemed to like on this night a 3,600 RPM two-step. Now let's go into run number 4. At this point, running a 5.00, I was trying anything I could to get a 499. So what I did is I'm going into high gear around 2.8 seconds into the run. So at 2.9 seconds, I added 1 degree of timing. Up to this point, timing has been locked out at 30 degrees. Like I said, it's on methanol. It's methanol injected, and the plugs are showing a great response to 30 degrees of timing. So at 2.9 degrees, I add 1 degree of timing and hold that through the entire run. I also upped the air pressure from 8 pounds to 9 pounds. I wanted to make a pretty big change. I left the two-step at 3,600. I brought the air pressure up to 9 pounds because I was kind of paddling the slicks a little bit. So I figured, let's bring some air pressure up on the slicks. Let's leave the shift point at 8,000, and let's bring 1 degree of timing in at 2.9 seconds. So let's take a look at that run. Okay, on this run, you can see from the time slip, we lost ET and we lost mile per hour pretty significantly. I did notice on this run, though, that I was really struggling keeping the car centered in the lane. The rear end was really dancing on me. I nearly lifted and pulled the chute on this run, but I was able to gather the car up. However, this run really kind of scared me because of how unsteady the car was getting. Whenever I could actually feel the 1 degree of timing come in on the car, and I felt the car begin to sashay back and forth, and I knew then that we couldn't bring a degree of timing in with the slicks in the condition they were in. So that was run number 4. Let's take a look at run number 5, the last run of the night. And on this run, instead of bringing 1 degree in at 2.9 seconds, I took 1 degree of timing out at 2.9 seconds and left everything else the same, except I put the air pressure back down to 8 pounds because the slicks were just so worn. I did not want to have the car sashaying around on the top end like that and scare my dad and myself half to death. So we brought the air pressure back down to 8 pounds. We took 1 degree of timing out from 2.9 seconds until the end of the run, which had us at 29 degrees of timing through that. So let's take a look at this last run. You can see here on the time slip, at this point we were done. Even pulling 1 degree of timing out the car, I just did not feel like I had good control of the rear end on the top end. And at that point I told Dad, we're done. I'm not running this car down the track again. I was losing mile per hour. The 60 foot was good on this last run. I pulled off a 114 again, but here again I had the air pressure back down, 3600 RPM launch, and the timing was still the same for the first 2.9 seconds of the run. However, once I got into high gear, the car was just sashaying around all over the track. So I don't know if there was starting to get dew on the track or if the track prep was going. I do know that after this run I made, another car went down the track and then they stopped the races and re-glued the track. Looking back on it, I wish I would have made one more pass after they glued the track, but I just felt like the be safe part of my logo, I felt like I was compromising that, and there was no need to jeopardize putting the car into the wall or getting myself hurt at that point. The car was moving around enough to where my dad and me, you can imagine my dad sitting here watching the car go down the track and just on the edge of losing it. So we called it a night. We did not get our 499 run. However, we were very pleased with the car. Absolutely love Darlington Dragway. We will be going back to Darlington Dragway. It's a lot longer ride for us with the motorhome. We have an old motorhome and a long enclosed trailer, so I can't do more than 50 to 55 miles an hour the whole way there. So it's a 3.5 hour trip for us. However, that's a very nice track and it's worth the trip. So like I said, I don't think I'll have slicks, but by the end of the season, but we will be going back to Darlington as soon as we can get back out and do some more hits on the car. Hey, I know the Studebaker videos are not as appealing as the chalkboard videos, but hopefully this video is kind of piecing together what we're doing and the changes we're making, and we're applying what I preach. We're practicing what I preach. Now, I did have a lot more squat in the car than I would generally put in a big tire slick car. However, the 4-link on the Studebaker is extremely dated. The 4-link brackets on the rear end are extremely dated. There's an 1.5 inch spacing between each hole on the rear end. It is ridiculous how big the movements are on the rear end. And then on the chassis, the holes aren't that far apart or spaced that far apart. However, the brackets are thin. They're too thin. And as a matter of fact, on the lower bar chassis side, the bottom 2 holes hang below the frame rail, which really makes me nervous. So I'm kind of limited on some of that. I really need to find someone that I can work with to get the brackets updated and get the rear end updated, just so I'm not having to make such big changes on the 4-link. However, I wanted to make a trip out, and I wanted to have a lot of squat in the car because it's a 120-inch wheelbase. So I was really trying to make sure we could get the car down on the 2-step. Looking back on Darlington, I wish I would have launched the car without the 2-step, just to compare it to the times when we were at South Carolina Motorplex, but I didn't. I also regret that I didn't try a much larger 2-step launch. I really wish I would have put it to 4,400 or 4,500 just to see if I could have got rid of some of the paddling of the tires and get a little more wheel speed in the slicks. And I just regret I didn't try that. However, guys, stay tuned. That night I just had to make a safety decision, and knowing we had a 3.5-hour ride home and a tropical storm coming in on us and the amount of wind we were having to fight with the motorhome and trailer on the interstate, it was just time to call it a night and get home. Hey, for those of you at Darlington who came by the pits and talked to us and talked about the channel, thank you for coming by. It means a lot to meet people who appreciate the Kevin Wilson SBC channel. I had a great time talking with everybody. Everyone was so kind to us, and it was so cool to catch up with some of the subscribers and hear some of the real world success stories and have a little suspension talk in between all of that. So thank you for that, and thank you for those of you who came by and said hello to me and Dad and just spent some time with us. Just remember this: I will be getting some more chalkboard videos out. I have a driveline video. You do not want to miss this. I am tired of talking about pinion angle, so we're going to settle it once and for all. There's so much confusion going around engine angles, driveline angles, pinion angles, drive shaft angles. We're going to set the record straight. You may not agree, but I'm going to have my last video on pinion angle and driveline angles, and we're done with it. And we're going to address a lot of the freaking comments that I've gotten over some of my videos on pinion angle. You don't want to miss these videos, so stay tuned. Hey, we're trying to do 3 things. We want to go fast. We want to go straight. More importantly, we want to be safe. Good night, guys.